I think you've made quite an impact on the next role that you stepped into. Then, like with Blend, you got them their first set of customers that was very, I would say, instrumental for their IPO. Did it make you, I would say, to put it in better words, did it get you closer to translating the technical complexity better because you've been working with people and product on a regular basis back then?
It's a good question. Reason why, so I've always been fascinated with startups. And when I joined Blend, obviously, I did join as, just an engineer, but I think any engineer at a small startup, often ends up being a little bit more of a product engineer. They did end up, of course, having a product team, and they did have a designer, of course, as well. That, when I was there, excellent guy. But, the thing that I found so compelling was with at Blend, we would fly out and actually meet the customer. I never met really a customer at Microsoft or Amazon. Obviously, I know those opportunities exist, but I had no exposure to them. So just being on site with the customer, and of course, I don't want to take full credit, right? I mean, it's a team effort, but I
Yes, I was
like
informed
to
you're
say,
a very humble person and you will do this in between the podcast. Guys, take a note. He is going to downplay everything he's done. So,
I do, I think it's just very exciting. They were taking from the founders were ex Palantir, and they took a lot from this Palantir playbook of like, speak to the customer and then kind of build, first version of what they want. It doesn't have to be perfect or 100%, but you can kind of get the idea across. It's much better with software than with words. And so I still have a memory of, I made like, I was building a dashboarding tool for these folks. At the time, we were looking at cash flow. This was before the company fully went into mortgage tech. It was sort of more of like a knowledge, store. And I built this Sankey diagram functionality into the dashboard, and we demoed it to them. And then they came back with like a PowerPoint presentation with a hand-drawn Sankey diagram. I was like, wow, that's really cool to feel that the thing that I made an impression on those folks, and that they were like, very interested and excited. And of course, Sankey diagram is great for something like cash flow, like seeing where things go. And so I'm, of course, I'm not saying that they never have exposure to that diagram, but just like being able to like build that dashboarding tool for them, allowing them to import everything, play with it, and stuff like that in a way that I think they hadn't before, made an impression that was like really exciting to me. I think the thing that you learn there is, because you get just such a, for me at least, because I get such a visceral feeling of like, hell yeah, it clicks with the customer. You just become somebody who really seeks that out. So, with Ambient, not, with Ambient, I think that that's, something that in some cases, like I've felt it here, but in some cases, we're always still searching for more ways in which we can build the best product and something that excites people and something like that. We have a lot of users who are very happy with even this first version, but, from my mind, there's like so much more to build and so many more cool stuff. I really want people to have that aha or
I
that
think people
wow moment.
already think Ambient is way ahead of its time. So, if you're telling me there's more cool stuff coming in, so people need to get ready for this.
Yeah, it's definitely early days here. I think we've got a lot of cool stuff that all of us are, wanting to build out, and it's, but it's a very, very technical product. It's very technically complex. And so to that end, right, it just, we're definitely taking some time, but also we want to make sure we're getting the fundamentals right. So we're putting in, extra work and time there. So just, be patient with us, but, I think we have some cool stuff coming around the corner.
Okay. And one more thing, Max, can you tell me more about, let's say, one of the kicks that you felt till now? Like you said, right, when you build and then you get that kick when someone really appreciates one thing that you have really put your heart and soul into, which is almost everything in Ambient. But what was that one instance of that kick you got with Ambient during, let's say, the test net or in the recent past, recent 2 weeks?
It's a good question. We have a support email, and a lot of people are emailing in with issues, but every once in a while somebody will email in saying like, wow, Ambient was really helpful, and email and gave me like just what I kind of was asking or needed for. Of course, we also get people saying it didn't. But when somebody, reaches out and say like, wow, I was really happy. Of course, the LLMs are fascinating technology, and there's, plenty that could be said about that. I know Travis and you have spoken about that at length as well. But, yeah, I just, the fact that we're putting them in front of people who maybe haven't, found a model that they like. I think a lot of people are kind of hunting for their model or for a model that they like, and so getting in front of somebody who had that moment is really nice. And then I think, I think like on the B2B side, we have some kind of like internal stuff in terms of TEs and end-to-end encryption that, I think are really compelling, and the idea of like fully private inference. And, when that stuff, hits, I think, I've spoken to people who seem quite excited about that, but I don't know that I've quite gotten the wow moment there, but that's something that I'm very excited about kind of putting into the world.
Amazing. A lot of wow moments are coming up on our Twitter as well. The team is constantly replying to the comments, and everyone is trying out the chat. They're posting and openly tweeting about it that they really like it, and they like how unbiased the responses are as well. So I think a lot more to come your way, Max, those wow moments. And another thing I would say, going step by step on the kind of like, profile you've had, the next thing that comes up on the research part of things, and I took some time to dig into the details. It was you were one of the number 10 engineers at Cockroach Labs, right? And you were a part of their 1.0 release. Now, a lot of people don't understand the kind of depth that comes with the 1.0 release. It's not a very casual chapter. And you need to really appreciate a 1.0 release and what it means in a company like that. So, what kind of pressure were you dealing with, or what kind of trade offs were you dealing with? And how can you associate that with the sort of like, pressure we've had with, let's say, the test net, because that's something similar to the kind of big release that we've had with Cockroach Labs for you then.
I'll say, okay, so Cockroach is a very interesting company because just like Ambient, I mean, they were, Ambient is not quite open source yet, but they were actually building out in the open, and they'd raised quite a bit of money, but they weren't bringing anything in. I think, it's a tough uh, place for a startup to be because you're still sort of operating on hope. You know that what you've built is, a good product in your heart, but, you're not necessarily getting payment. So I would say there were a lot of interesting things at Cockroach that I sort of learned, and in terms of pressure, one, big thing, and I guess I'll say this, that, and I'm not hardly a perfect person, and, in my career, I've definitely made plenty of mistakes. And at Cockroach, I think an interesting thing that I kind of learned, I was very much like, well, we've got to, really focus on our customers, and we have to build what, they need, and we need to be talking to them and figuring out what they need. Inside the company, there was a lot of belief, hey, we're people who have been database operators before. We know what the pain points are. We need to build that. And I think one thing that I kind of learned while I was there is like, actually, you might be surprised sometimes who your early customer is. I think a big early customer of some of the tooling, because again, I started out building some of these dashboards at Blend. I moved over and built actually some dashboards. The UI, was one of a team of, two. Me and Matt Tracy built the, dashboards at Cockroach, and, the first user wasn't necessarily somebody who was, just a Postgres user. Actually was, somebody on the team at Cockroach trying to debug something or figure out, something, because they were who operated the most Cockroach clusters was actually Cockroach DB developers. So I think one thing that I kind of didn't realize at first, that I kind of realized ultimately, was that, you may think like, oh, we need to be talking to these potential customers and stuff like that, but they did actually have a good understanding of operating these databases. So yeah, I think the pressure that you're under is, of course, that you're trying to find these first customers. And, I thought I had an idea of who those were and wanted to build things for them. I had an idea of more of like a MongoDB type of user. And, like bringing them back into kind of the Postgres fold, but making it really easy for them and scalable for them and all that stuff. But the reality is that, I mean, these, I think that the best places that were the most interested were people who had kind of hit the, were actually operators and database experts who had hit kind of the technical limitations, who knew that, something like Postgres didn't scale, or who had, rules about where their data was supposed to be stored, that couldn't necessarily, like in terms of different, like, it might be one company needs certain data need to live in the EU and certain data to live in the EUS and certain data to live in Australia. And Cockroach actually enabled that sort of stuff. And those people were the most interested, and were the most interesting contracts for somebody like us than just a bunch of, free users, because we didn't necessarily make any money. And of course, as a startup, you're burning through money, so you need to find somebody who, it's like the old YC thing, make something people want. You need to build something that people are willing to pay for. And so yeah, I would say like there was a lot of pressure there. I think I maybe, was a little bit sure of myself that wasn't necessarily warranted, but I'm proud of obviously getting, what I built, helped build there, and getting things over the line. And I also guess I want to share what I learned there a little bit, that like, you have to kind of examine some of your assumptions about who you're building this first version for. I think, I see that with Ambient sometimes of like, there's a push and pull. Like on the one hand, we have the web UI and we want to make it easier to use for users. On the other hand, we also need to make it really easy to use for developers, for companies who want to switch out their model and stuff like that, because we have these differing, priorities, and we need to find people who are compelled enough by, what we've built that they find value in it.